This is Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkel.
Welcome back to Inside the Wolf's Den with your hosts, Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkel. Today we have a guest with us in the house, our good friend, Ben Smith. How are you, Ben?
I'm doing great, guys. It's wonderful to be with y'all again. Thanks for having me.
And just to something totally random, you are the first returning guest we have allowed to the show, so you are very special.
That's how much we love you, Ben.
Man, what an honor! Gosh, I had no idea. That's
I don't do it, but I made an exception for you, and so we're excited to get into today.
Yes, and because it's also my favorite S word, which is sales. I love sales. You love sales, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. So just a quick bio on Ben. So Ben Smith is the founder of BrightReach Sales, an education and training company focused on helping property management entrepreneurs grow through outbound business development. With over 13 years of sales experience, including leadership roles at rising startups in the PM industry, Ben specializes in building scalable systems, refining messaging, and leading high-performance teams. He's passionate about guiding others towards their goals with clarity and purpose. So, again, Ben, I think this is a fantastic topic to talk about. We're going to be talking about outbound sales, right? Which, in today's market, we need to be doing everything, but not a whole lot of property management companies or any sales people do a lot of outbound. So, let's get right into it.
Yeah, that's great. I love it.
Yeah, maybe just start off a little bit. So if people haven't seen your prior show, maybe just share, what, how you got to where you are today, and just a brief introduction and what you've done prior to this, and then what got you into starting BrightReach Sales.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the bio said, I've been in sales for about 13 years. I started my career in insurance, and about 7 years ago, I stumbled my way into a little Raleigh-based startup called Filter Easy, and really just got lucky. I was looking for a startup because I heard startups had cool culture, right? Like I was like, that's what I need. I want to be in that kind of environment. And oddly enough, I was a consumer of Filter Easy. I had air filters shipped to my house, and I had no idea that they had this property management vertical and this program built out. And so I reached out to Thad, who's the CEO, just kind of out of the blue. There's some outbound job searching for you, and luckily landed there and spent about 5 years there. And that was kind of my foray into the property management industry. Obviously, most folks probably know them now as Second Nature, but at the time it was Filter Easy. So
much smaller.
Much smaller. Yeah, I mean, my first day, it was their mid-year sales retreat, and we're in a little conference room with probably 15 people total. There were more people at the company, but the PM team was 15 people, and now I think that group is well over 200 people with everything that they've built out. So
amazing.
It looked a little bit different, but it was so fun to be a part of those early days. And as it relates to outbound, right? Like when at that point, there were very few property managers that knew about what we did. I mean, certainly within the NARPM world, that was where they had gotten some traction. But I came in and there were no inbound leads coming my way. Right? I had to go out and find people. I actually had a territory that didn't have any NARPM chapters in it. So there weren't people I could go meet with in person, right? Like, it was hitting the phones, it was sending cold emails, it was all that fun stuff. So I've always really enjoyed kind of the hunt of outbound, right? Finding people that don't know about what we do and providing value. And one of the things I observed even at that point was most property management companies, growth was really driven by inbound leads, right? A lot of the conversation around business development was, SEO and ranking high on Google, that sort of stuff, which is obviously important.
Right.
And as I was leaving Second Nature, I actually went to a company called Discover, which last time I was on, Kristen and I were talking about Discover and Outbound. And they have this great tool that is an absentee owner database, right? So you can search for people in your market that own rental properties. And as a salesperson, I was looking at that and I was like, why wouldn't you want this? This is perfect. Here's all the people you want to work with. And what I quickly found was, I'd show it to folks and they would say, oh, this is great. Looks cool. I've never done any outbound before, right? Like I'm not really sure where to start with this. And so that was kind of, that was a couple of years ago. That's really when the idea of BrightReach was born in my head, working with property managers to really diversify the way that they bring on new clients, right? And taking a more proactive approach to finding folks that you want to work with. And so, here we are. I'm about a month into BrightReach Sales, and have really enjoyed having these conversations with people, because I think what I recognize is a lot of people know that they need to be doing outbound, but they're just not sure what it looks like for them or what they need to do. And so I feel like the time is right. It's a great opportunity. There's more conversation around it than there's ever been. And so finally decided to take the leap and go out and do this on my own.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. Can you just I guess share the differences between a little bit? You went into a little bit, but just so listeners or people in other industries understand, what's the difference between outbound and inbound? If just keep it.
So dummy it down for us.
We'll start there and then we'll work our way up. But and and especially in the property management. But let me let you enter, and I'll give my 2 cents.
That's a great question. Yeah. So when I think inbound, I'm thinking of folks that they have some sort of identified need, right? So if I put myself in the shoes of somebody who owns a rental property, if I'm reaching out to you, it's because I know I need a property manager, or I know that I want to evaluate property management services for my rental property, right? Now that person might be self-managing. They might already be working with a property manager and they don't like the service that they're getting. Maybe they're thinking about buying their first investment property, right? But that person has maybe a good way to think of it is that it's a very front of mind need, right? Because if they're going to your website and they're filling out a form that says, hey, I want a free rental analysis, or I want to know more about what you do, they're kind of like, I would describe it as like actively in the buying cycle, right?
Right.
The reality is, and actually last year, Lead Simple and Peter Lohman put out a really interesting report called the PM report, where they interviewed 750 landlords, and what that study came back with was 52% of folks who own real estate investments work with a professional property management company. The other 48% are self-managing in some way. And so
big number still.
Yes. Yeah. So the market is, especially for outbound, is that other 48%. Those people that are self-managing, they are out navigating the day-to-day of managing a real estate investment while working a full-time job, or maintaining their family, right? Like all this stuff.
Right.
So the idea with outbound is more, rather than waiting for folks to come to us, we're going out and finding ways to proactively reach out to them. And I think that there's a number of different ways to think about that, right? Like some of the more traditional ways we would consider outbound is, making cold calls or sending cold emails, or, sending direct mail, right? Even if it's just finding ways to provide value to those people, not directly pitch them, right? Which is, I think a lot of people, when they think of cold calls, they think of somebody calling them and just pitching them their services right off the bat, right?
Yeah.
But really, I think you're trying to find ways to bring new people into the pipeline, right? We want to spread the word of what we do as a professional management company to folks who are not out actively looking, because those people have pain points. They have challenges that they face, and even if the timing is not such that they're actively reaching out to us, we want to be on their mind if a need does arise.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I break it down. Obviously, there's overlap, right? Because you could send somebody a postcard in the mail and 6 months later they come to your website, right? Do we call that inbound? Do we call that outbound? Well, hopefully you're tracking it well and you know that it came from an outbound effort.
From a postcard. And then probably that 48% or that market is larger because you could be reaching out to people that do have professional management and, you know, they're somebody's maybe not doing a great job and they're looking to make a move or a change, like you mentioned before, but you could catch somebody right at the right time. They could get that postcard in the mail and they've been trying to reach their property management company and nobody's answering the phone and they just got that postcard from me and like, hey, well, maybe I need to make a change.
Yeah,
you know, so,
no, totally. I think like looking at it, over the last several years, we have been very spoiled, right? Because leads would come to us and business development managers, you know, leads are coming to them. So how do you change that mindset to not just the business owner, but also the business development manager, like, hey, like, you know, you got to be out there to get out there and go hunting for it, right? They're not just going to come to you. How do you incentivize them? How do you motivate them?
Yeah, gosh, Joni, that's such a good question. And it really depends on the type of person that you have, right? Because even within someone having sales experience, I think there are people that are more geared towards that hunter mentality versus, you know, maybe someone who's more comfortable just being the closer, right? So I think you do want to have awareness around the people on your team and what their skill set is. But you know, from my sales experience across a number of different roles, a number of different industries, companies, you know, I think it's really helpful to instill a mindset with your salesperson that, you know, hey, we have a goal to reach as a team. And so if we're able to reach that goal and exceed it with doing nothing but inbound, that's great. Like I no problem admitting it's easier to talk to someone that is reaching out to you first.
Right.
That's a good thing. But the reality is oftentimes there's a gap between what our goals are and what's coming to us. And so what I've tried to instill in the folks that I've managed, salespeople that I've managed, is this mindset of, hey, we own our number, right? And so whether it's, you know, hey, we're going to close 20 doors a month, we get 10 of those inbound, great. Where did the other 10 come from? And so if you have a person that does really resonate with that mindset and wants to hunt, I think it's a lot easier. If you have someone that's hesitant, I think there are ways, you know, you can create additional incentives around leads that are sourced through outbound versus inbound would be an example. Or, you know, I think one of the other things that I've seen people do successfully is try to put tools around that person to kind of make up for that gap, right? So an example might be maybe you're going to hire an outbound dialer, right? Who's going to call and try to set appointments for the BDM. So there's a number of different ways to tackle it. I don't think there's really a one size fits all, but you definitely want to have an understanding of your business development person and what those skills are and really set expectations well, I think is a lot of what it comes down to.
Absolutely.
Something we've always struggled, right? I think that next evolution, I think most management companies will start with a BDM, mainly inbound, right? Handling the inbound stuff. But like you said, there's a gap majority of the months. And it's like, well, our expectation as owners, like, well, go out there and hunt and get it. It's like, they're like, well, why should I have to? And I don't, know, you're not doing your marketing or your marketing.
It's always the marketing guy's fault, right? How many leads coming in.
But, and it's always been a struggle and we've always battled with like, you know, and that's, we need to take that, and that's why you need somebody like Ben to come up with the next step, our next evolution, which should be probably an outbound and inbound. Right,
because I think we talked about this maybe on the last podcast, is that you talked about the skill set needed, right? Yeah. So in reality, it's probably two different skill sets for inbound and outbound, right? And so looking at that, and like you said, Ben, like setting that expectation up front. And sometimes that's hard when you've already had a business development manager for years, right? And now you're adding something, a new tool, a new system into their normal process. And they're like, what? Now I have to do this, right? And so, so I can see that can be challenging. But I mean, I think with setting the expectation up front, that would really help those challenges.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And you kind of touched on something with the, maybe you have a person that does outbound exclusively and somebody does inbound. I have a couple clients that are in that position, and I think that is a viable strategy. Because again, like to be doing outbound, you want somebody that really does have that mindset of, I'm gonna go and I'm not gonna quit until I'm successful, right? Because you're gonna get told no a lot. I mean, I think that's the reality, and that's one of the things about sales is like, I think sometimes people look at salespeople and say like, oh, they do whatever they want. They're the high flyer, right? But the reality is you're in the benefits of sales. The freedom of time and the freedom of income, like that comes with a lot of rejection and being told no a lot, and constantly having to battle that question of like, can I do this? A lot of roles, you don't have that same doubt that's constantly creeping in.
Yeah, totally. There should be no ceiling for salespeople.
Exactly.
Sky's the limit.
A lot of confidence too, right? But can you share maybe a highlight, that you within your company that you've seen where like a success story of outbound sales, either existing client you're working with or one in the past? Can you highlight somebody and just how that transpired or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think getting one of the things that's most helpful when doing outbound is when you are able to get some of those quick wins, right? And so I'll give you two quick examples. So one of the companies I'm working with, they've got somebody that's doing exclusively outbound. And so one of the things that we started with was, all right, we're going to call leads that it's a for rent by owner situation, right? So the owner has listed the property on Zillow or one of the other sites. You can check tax records pretty easily to see like, okay, this is the owner of the property. It's not a management company. And he was this guy that I'm working with was able to get somebody on the phone here in his third or fourth week, and the guy has 2 properties and he's been burned by management companies in the past, and so we're starting to build that relationship. And like that, to me, that's really exciting because that's what it's all about, right? Is building relationships. So I think it's one of the things that's really fun for me is working with salespeople who are really eager, right? And so being able to celebrate that early success with them. I'll tell you one other story that's really funny. There's somebody I worked with back when I was with Discover that, they wanted to do a trial of the platform, right? And they'd never done any outbound before, and so this customer of mine just quickly, like, they found a few property owners that had portfolios, right? 7, 10 property. And she just fired off a cold email to 10 of these people. And the next day got a response from someone that had 7 properties that was ready to go.
Oh, wow.
What you talked about before, Shawn, about that, just that perfect timing. There was a need that was top of mind, and that email hit the inbox. And I think what I love about that story, what it illustrates to me, is that I think a lot of people get tied up thinking about their strategy and what am I going to say, and I've got to craft the perfect email. And of course there are things you want to do and not do. There's not a silver bullet, but you can structure a cold email in a way that is going to resonate more. But she wasn't even, she just typed out what came to mind, sent it, and it worked right away. I think it just illustrates the most important thing of this is to get going. You know what I mean? It's not, you can spend a lot of time sitting there and thinking about, how do I do this in the most perfect way? But the reality is you just got to start.
Right. So, you don't have to know everything. You don't have to get it right. What comes to mind is when Shawn and I used to knock on pre-foreclosure doors, right? I mean, similar to the for rent by owner, right? And so we would, print out a list of people going into pre-foreclosure and actually knock on doors and just have that conversation. We didn't know what we were talking about. We got doors slammed in our face, but the key was getting out there, doing it, consistency, right? Because there is, like you said, Shawn, there's a timing to that, and you're going to get one that says, you know what, I'm ready. I need to give my properties to you because I am ready to give this up, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. It's awesome.
Talk a little bit about the ideal client, like profile and defining that, because you mentioned the for rent by owner and calling and doing all. It's like that would not be my ideal client, 'cause they're going to be a pain in the rear. They're going to be guys that's going to nickel and dime us and all that. So they would not be my ideal client. But talk a little bit about that as far as knowing who you're trying to go after, and then build the audience, and then that's who you should go hunt after.
Yeah, I think it's critical. Really, regardless of whether we're talking about inbound or outbound, knowing who your ideal client is so important. Mm-hmm. I think it's particularly important in outbound because what it allows you to do is tailor a message to a specific person, right? So I'll just use two very common broad categories, which would be kind of that accidental landlord investor who, maybe they're moving out of the house because they're getting relocated for work. They're going to hold it and rent it, but they're probably going to sell it in a couple of years. Maybe they're thinking about moving back into it. The things that are valuable to that person are different from, say, the intentional investor who owns 2, 3, 4 properties and is trying to grow a portfolio, and it is a long-term strategy for them, right? So I think being really clear on that, what I think it allows you to do is tailor your message to be even more specific. So
right.
if you were to think about, let's say I'm prospecting to you guys, right? And you have rental properties, obviously. Mm-hmm. Hey, Shawn and Joni, I manage rental properties in Houston, Texas. Would you, do you want to work with me, kind of thing, right?
Right.
It's just so broad and vague that what that tells me as a prospect is that you know very little about me and what I'm experiencing. You know that I own rental properties, that's great, but that's not very specific. Versus, hey, Shawn and Joni, we work with investors who have small portfolios in the greater Houston area. I noticed that you have a rental property over in Cypress. That's one of my favorite areas of town. We've got quite a few rentals there, right? You can kind of see how we're starting to get more specific with what we're talking about, but then also more specific with the problem set that person faces, right? The accidental landlord, right? More of an emotional attachment, may not know as much about real estate investing and how to build wealth with real estate. They're going to have more questions, right? So I think being able to get clear on that person and what matters to them just allows you to be more specific in the way that you provide value, right? Because at the end of the day, I think that's what really matters here. Is we're here to solve problems for people. And so if you're able to tailor a message that directly addresses a problem that they're having or they've had in the past, that's going to resonate a lot more. So,
yeah, I think that's key. And it's not that we would like the intentional invest. That would be our ideal client because that's the language we speak. That's the messaging. That's the the wealth optimizer that we use to show them the returns, because all they care about is return. It's an investment. They aren't as emotional tied to where the guy that is going to rent it and then move back into it, he's super emotionally tied to it. So they destroy something, he's getting all bent out of shape about it. And so they wouldn't be our ideal client. But we managed for both. But yeah, you're right, because a lot of times your systems, your processes, the language you speak, and your organization
absolutely
caters to one of those, right? And you can do a better job, and they have a better experience when you're, when you're focused on who you're trying to serve.
Yeah.
Love
that.
So that's huge. We went into some of the challenges, but talk more about the challenges you face with outbound. I think Joni said about it, and you mentioned it. There's a lot more rejection than the client picking up the phone and or raising their hands and, yes, I have an investment property. I'm looking for a property management company. Please help me. That's a pretty easy sell.
Yeah.
than the guy that it comes down to just money or fees and maybe your guys' systems and stuff like that. But talk a little bit more of the challenges about, number one, getting in front of these clients, I think, and then how do you in a fast-paced world like we live in today, how do you grab their attention, I think, is another problem to be able to talk to them.
Yeah.
Very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, I mean, I think the rejection is the biggest piece of why people are scared of doing outbound, or they start doing it but they're not consistent with it, is because you are going to get told no a lot. And I think if you were to, like, let's put ourselves in the prospect shoes for a minute, right? Maybe I own one rental property and I've had it for a couple years, and I've had the same great tenant in there for 2 years, and it's a newer house, so I haven't had any maintenance issues. I haven't had to put the property on the market and lease it, right? Like, a property manager reaching out to me, like, that message may not resonate right then because things are pretty easy, right? You know what I mean? Like, there's a reason I'm not reaching out to a property manager, is because I'm getting a check every month and not having to do much for it, right? But again, like, back to the timing piece. I think the for rent by owner is a perfect example, right? So if you think about the life cycle of a property, and when are we really having to do a lot of work, right? If I was a self-managed landlord, what's a period of time in which I'm going to have to be devoting a lot of energy? And that, having it for lease is right,
exactly.
Because I've had to go through the process of getting it ready, right? Which who knows if I've done a good enough job doing that, right?
They're probably pulling their hair out with the contractors that they hired to begin with.
That's right. That's exactly right. I'm having to do showings, right? Which tenants are telling me they want to come see it. I'm driving out to the property. They're not showing up. Or they're not qualified. Or, my favorite is, they get out there and, like, I'm looking for a property. I'm looking for a lease start date 3 months from now. And you're like, what? Like, no, like,
I need this lease tomorrow.
What are you talking about? Right. So that's painful. And then, like, on top of that, let's say you find someone. Okay, well, I mean, you guys know how much fraud exists in the application process now. If you're a self-managing landlord trying to navigate that without the technology, tools, knowledge of what people are doing, like, to get around income verification, right? Like, there's just so much that goes into that period of time that is a time that if you were reaching out, and even more specifically, like, hey, maybe I identify that it's a for rent by owner and it's been sitting on the market for 30 days, right?
Yeah.
Like, like, there's probably some pain that exists because they're not making money and they're having to jump through all these hoops. So I think there are ways to move the needle your direction, right? And that would be a good example. Another might be maybe a lead that did come inbound, but you didn't convert it, right? They hired a competitor, or they decided to continue self-managing. I mean, it may or may not surprise you to know that there are a lot of people that have this big category in their CRM called lost leads that they haven't touched in years, right?
Yep.
And those are technically, you're reaching out, you're going outbound to them, but there's just a hint maybe of warmness there because they had interest at some point in working with you. So I think, all of your outbound efforts don't have to be strictly, like, completely cold leads. I think it's a mixture of different channels and different types of people that you're reaching out to. And you can find ways to warm those up. So I it's that rejection. I mean, I think that's the hardest part. And to do this well, you have to be consistent over a long period of time. And so that's what puts a lot of people off, I think.
Right.
Or scares them about doing it.
Yeah.
And you did a really good job of, like, especially with the for rent by owner, explaining what you were doing, in essence, was explaining the pain points.
Yeah,
and, like, those could each be an email drop or or you did a great job of just points in the conversation that you have with that person, because I guarantee you that. And
they're like, oh yeah, that happened to me. Oh yeah.
And they're probably a professional and they don't have time to, like, and I don't know why they would be anyway trying to lease on their own property, but that would, they're probably, like, frustrated by that point. Another one would be, like, the eviction list, and as long as they're not being managed by a management company, they just went through a very painful or going through a very painful process, and you can help them through that process, and that's how you add your value, to which hopefully they would turn the property over to you, and you gain their trust. And so there's ways, especially like, a lot of these, we get talked to by a lot of RPMs that are very small, and it's like, the leads aren't coming in, the marketing's not working, nothing's working. It's like, well, what are you doing? Like, you gotta at this point, your whole job should be to hunt. Who cares about how to lease up a property? Just go get them. You don't have any.
Totally. When we first started, that's what we did. We were out there.
Hunting. But like, go after all those eviction. Yeah, and something like that, or a for rent by owner. Build all that, and yet you're going to get a lot of rejection, but you're also going to get some people that have some really massive pain. And yet, if you can help somebody and add value to them at that time, then that's how you're going to gain their trust and confidence to manage it. But
No, Ben, I one question I want to ask you, because I think a lot of property managers, they know they have to do something right. They have to do something different, and they know they need to do outbound, but not quite sure how. What advice would you give to them as to how to get started? What would you do to get started?
Yeah, that's a great question, and obviously a lot of it depends on the situation. But one of the things that I run into, a fair amount, is business owners who are wearing the sales hat, right? Mm-hmm. They don't have a BDM. Right. They are managing the operation, but they're also responsible for sales, right? The amount of time that person has available is very different from, say, a BDM who they eat, sleep, and breathe bringing on new opportunities, right? Like that's all they're responsible for. So I think one thing that I would consider first is like, what amount of time can I commit to devote to this, right? Because you don't want to come up with this great big grand strategy and then get a couple weeks into it and find that you've set unrealistic targets for yourself, right?
Absolutely.
The simplest way to put it is like, if you're the business owner and maybe you have a couple hundred properties, you don't have a salesperson yet, it's probably not realistic that you're going to make 50 to 100 cold calls a day, right? Like, it's probably just not going to happen. And so I would think about what you do have time for, what you can commit to from that standpoint, who you want to work with, right? Like, who are those people that you're ideally wanting to work with? Because that can determine a little bit where you invest resources to even say build a
strategy.
List. Mm-hmm. Yep. So I think getting clear around the time that you have and who you're trying to reach out to is really important. But I also think back to that question we were just talking about, like getting really clear about like what the problem is that you solve for people, right? Because I think a lot of people, like if you were imagining you've built the greatest property management company in existence. Like you have the processes, the technology, the people, right? You would want people to know about that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, you would want to be screaming from the rooftops that people should be working with you because you have the best thing, right? I mean, this is not unique to property management, right? This is the world of sales and marketing, right? I think you have to believe that you have something that's worth telling people about. So some of what has to happen, I think, is a little bit of a mindset shift away from, I don't want to bother people, right? Like sending somebody a cold email or something in the mail, making a cold call, right? I'm going to be pestering them. Like, I think you have to have that mindset shift of like, well, I'm doing this because these people have challenges and they have goals, and I can help with those things, right? That mindset piece is really critical, and so I think that is an important place to start, along with being realistic about the amount of time that you have and who you're trying to reach. So
love that.
Yeah.
Can you just get into a little bit of what BrightReach, like what programs you offer? What do you, how are you fulfilling and working with clients and, helping them reach the next level with outbound sales? Can you get into a little bit of that on kind of your guys' services?
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously we're 5 or 6 weeks in here, but the way that I'm working with folks right now is very one-to-one, right? So working alongside companies to build that strategy, get clear around some of those questions that we just talked about. Who is our ideal client? What are their challenges? How are we able to help? All the way to where do we go to find these people, right? How do we build a list? How do we use technology to automate some of the steps in the process, right? I really want to help people get through that initial, let's call it setup phase, right? Because I think that it's easy to kind of stall out there, right? So when I'm working with folks, we're putting together the strategy, we're building the systems that are necessary to execute it, and then really providing accountability long term, right? What are the things that we want to track? I think one thing that might be helpful for folks that are starting to do this is, if you're wondering about like KPIs and results and that sort of thing, like I think it's as simple as like, how much activity does it take, whether it's calls, emails, letters, whatever, how much activity does it take for us to get to a conversation, right? Like that's kind of the first piece. People ask all the time, like, what's the ROI on outbound? How many doors am I going to get? The answer is obviously it depends. But the thing that I would start with is if you can get really clear on how many activities, outbound activities you need to do to get to a conversation, that's a really important thing to start with. So I'm helping people build that infrastructure, but then also, advising as they get started and start actually executing to be able to say like, all right, how's it going? What's resonating, right? Like some of the fun for me around outbound is like testing different things, even just messaging, right? Like if you were doing a lot of outbound, let's say you were email focused in what you were doing, once you get to a certain level of volume, you can start to look at those messages that you're sending and say, oh man, like this email that I used about identifying tenant or applicant fraud in the application process, that a lot of people clicked that email. Maybe that's something I should do more of, right? Versus this other thing that, didn't get as much traction, like sort of the A/B testing, like that's the sort of stuff that I think is really fun. And you can't get there until you start actually executing and doing it, right? You won't know until the market tells you. So yeah, coming alongside people and helping them get started. And, I've got quite a few things in the works that I'm really excited about that are going to help people be able to do this at scale and also stick with it long term. So.
That's awesome. Well, are there any tools that you would recommend? I mean, with AI now, right? It's so crazy. I mean, I've even seen like the role playing like AI tools for sales, but also even like the other day I got a call and it sounded like somebody in person like calling, right? It was all AI. I was like, wow, this sounds real. Yeah. Do you see any of that in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. This some of this technology is not really made it into the property management space yet, but it very much exists in kind of the, think about like the software sales world around, certainly using AI for crafting messages and automating some things in the sales process. But like I'll use a good example of a piece of tech that I looked at yesterday, which was around email verification, right? So a big part of going out and finding your list of prospects is obviously if you're going to call them or email them, you need to find their phone number and email address. Well, there's technology out there now where it will like pull from like 15 different sources to verify like what that person's phone number is or email is. It's looking at all these different sources, right? So there's stuff like that that's coming in that I think is going to be really, really cool, because obviously if you're investing the time into doing outbound, right, getting accurate information is immediately like that can be so time consuming if you're working a list where every email address is bouncing back to you, right? And that's frustrating. So
yes,
there are things like that, but even like, I've looked at some tools where, Joni, let's say I sent you a cold email and it had a link to something in it, right? Like a lead magnet or some sort of guide that I built. Okay, well, if you click that link, it's going to notify me and then I'm going to pick up the phone and call you, right? Because
Yeah.
I know that, like, you're looking at it, or
Right.
there's some level of interest that you've clicked the link, or maybe I want to automate it so that a postcard gets mailed to you if you did something right. If you open the email more than 3 times, send them a postcard, right? So I think there's a lot of stuff like that is coming out that is, again, like it's not a perfect system, but you're just increasing your odds, right? You're layering in things that are going to increase the likelihood that you're able to actually talk to a person.
Yeah,
So.
that's awesome. Well, this outbound stuff is pretty cool. I always say this, you have to adapt. You have to be willing to pivot in markets like this, right? And so, yeah, love this, Ben. Thank you so much for today.
Yeah, how can our listeners reach out to you and connect with you if they're interested in your services, learning more about outbound sales and all the services you offer? How can people reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is BrightReachSales.com. Actually, on my website, that I've got a white paper that I put together that's just called Intro to Outbound, right?
Okay.
So it's just
Nice.
it's a free resource that kind of talks through some of the components of putting together a strategy, some of the things to be thinking about. I also have a newsletter that you can subscribe to on my website that goes out every week, that is specifically geared towards, salespeople in the property management space, business owners in the property management space, and sharing some fun stories of things I've experienced over the years. And they can also, you can reach out to me via email, which ben@brightreachsales.com if you want to learn more. So
Awesome. And we'll have that all in the show notes. So
Yeah, we appreciate that. So we appreciate you being back with us, and I'm excited to hear about the future of BrightReach and all that you accomplish and all the people you help along the way. So looking forward to hearing more success stories. But thank you again for today, and hope the listeners got a lot out of that today. So
yes, they will. Thanks so much, Ben, and we'll see everyone next time.
thanks, guys.
You've been listening to Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Shawn and